Morbidly Beautiful presents a horror interview podcast hosted by Brodie Hubbard. You have entered the chamber.
If you are watching or listening to this on the release date, happy Friday the 13th. It's October, and you have entered the chamber on the Morbidly Beautiful network. You just heard the theme song "Itchin' for the Blood" by Lil Boodang, and today's guest is Troy Escamilla. He is the writer and director of Party Night, Mrs. CLAUS, also known as Stirring, and Teacher Shortage. He's a director at the Houston Horror Film Fest and one of the hosts of one of my favorite horror podcasts, Dark Night of the Podcast. As of this October 2023, today, Friday the 13th, he has launched an Indiegogo campaign for his next horror film, Hollow Lake. You can find the Indiegogo campaign link in the description of this podcast, or follow Troy Escamilla on Twitter /X at Troy Escamilla, on Instagram at Troy ESC, or find him or the movie on Facebook. Now let's welcome Troy to the chamber. Let's pick up in the conversation where we were talking about locations.
Actually, all of my films were made in Texas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I lived in Houston for about 13 years, which is, where I got involved with the Houston Horror Film Festival, which I'm still involved with. I moved back to Iowa for 1 year.
Okay.
Yeah, to be closer to family and whatnot. I had some issues going on, but once I got back there, I realized it really wasn't for me. The winters and all that stuff. So yeah, I just had a job opportunity kind of present itself in Vegas. So I thought, why not? So I've been here for over a year now. It's hard to believe. Yeah, it's been a while.
I have talked to a couple of folks who've said they feel Las Vegas is going to become more of a hub for actually making movies. And I've actually known some creators and specifically horror folk who've moved out there for that purpose. Had you gotten kind of that impression as well, or is it just a coincidence that the job brought you there?
I feel like it's I know that there are other filmmakers here in Vegas. I know like Drew Marvick, who is pretty big on the indie horror scene. He did Pool Party Massacre. He lives here. Heidi Moore, who did Dolly Deadly and now a sequel, she's here. I have not met up with these people in Vegas yet, but I know there are like a small sector of indie filmmakers that are here, specifically horror filmmakers. I just, the year that I've been here, I've been really consumed with just getting situated, getting, acclimated to my job, getting acclimated to the environment. So, and still also trying to work on the Houston Horror Film Festival and being involved with that, the film festival aspect of it. So I haven't really had a chance to explore the Vegas scene, but I would imagine with California being so close and, LA starting to, have some problems in terms of just, you name it. I think there's a lot of people that are fleeing here from LA, from Hollywood. So yeah, I can definitely see that as a strong possibility.
Yeah. I was in LA for 10 years and I did love my time there. I enjoyed the projects I worked on, and in my day gig was in TV. So that was cool. Okay. But I did, for financial reasons, a big part of it, moved back to my home state in Arizona. And I've actually, the last couple episodes of this podcast, which is fairly new, have had Arizona filmmakers on it. So there's definitely like a Southwest contingent. And as you mentioned, Texas being a long time film hub as well. But I do sense, though, through some mutual friends of ours and things like that there is still a strong Midwestern horror kind of nexus as well. And so I'll give you an example of like some folks who I think might be more outside the LA area. Like I was watching The Barn 2.
Oh yeah, Justin Seaman. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I see Kaylee Williams pop up, who I've seen in, if not all of your movies, at least two of them that I can recall.
Two, yes.
Yes, Mrs. CLAUS and Teacher Shortage.
Mm-hmm.
Julianne Prescott's in there, who is also in Teacher Shortage.
Yeah.
And then Brian Papadrea pops up in Barn 2. He, has made some stuff with our mutual friend, Zach Schildwalker, who's currently making Meat with your podcast co-host.
Yeah.
So there's definitely like a string of people who I see pop up in each other's projects. So here's my question. Do I just have very good taste and the same people happen to work in all these movies? Or is there kind of an interconnection between folks in these multiple projects that I'm seeing?
Well, if you're watching my films, you have good taste. No, I do think, to be honest, I think I think it is like an interconnectivity between indie filmmakers. I think that, even if we don't talk necessarily, because I've never had a conversation with, like, let's say Justin Seaman about Kaylee Williams specifically, or Julianne Prescott, but I feel like, we're friends on social media. We see each other's posts. So I do think that we get a keen eye for who seems to be like a decent person to work with based on how many other projects they're doing. Kaylee Williams came to my attention through one of her early films she did with Cameron McCausland called The Lashman.
Okay.
And I thought she was wonderful in it. And then I kind of realized, oh my God, she's a Facebook friend. So I started to kind of not stalk her, but do a little bit of research and say, okay, she's been in a lot of indie stuff, so she must be good. She must be easy to work with. So I had reached out to her about Mrs. Claus, and I'm glad I did, because she's amazing to work with. I think she's phenomenal in that short amount of time we have her on screen in Mrs. Claus. She's obviously probably one of the more memorable characters in the film. And then I felt, because I made her be such a bitch in Mrs. Claus, I had to bring her back and redeem her and give her more of a sweet character to play in Teacher Shortage. But I do think that there is a core group of actors that you see in a lot of indie films, going from indie film to indie film, and it's because they got the reputation for they're good actors. And B, because they are easy to work with, and will bring something to the project, will promote the project. Julianne was great. She was only on Teacher Shortage for a couple days, but she was fabulous to work with. So I like you, I'm always like, I get really happy when I see people that I've worked with pop up in other films. It's great. It kind of brings back memories of working with them, and kind of gets me excited to jump back into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've also, I've seen, so I watched your movies all out of order as far as how they were released. They're all quality. Like, you can tell right away that, like, Troy does good stuff and he gets the best people for it. And I think one of the big indicators of that is that one of your early movies has a special effects person who really broke out, didn't they?
Heather Benson, yeah. She did the effects for Party Night and Mrs. Claus, and has gone on to work on The Walking Dead, some major Hollywood films. And here I was, it was just a tiny little, basically two-man crew with her and her little jibs and stuff on set on Party Night. And she knew what she was doing. She absolutely knew what she was doing, and it does not surprise me one bit that she has gone on to really be successful, because she's a hard worker. She has a good eye for effects. Party Night was rough. That was a rough film shoot. That was my first film. I had no clue what I was doing, but we got it done. And I learned a lot.
It doesn't show that you didn't know what you were doing. No. Even at Party Night, you could see that
there are some things that when I watched, I cringe because I'm like, oh, if I would have only known now what I know, if I only would have known then what I know now, I would have, made sure that there were some certain things that were corrected in that film. But it taught me a lot. That was a great cast too. That was a bunch of young, up and comers who have also, several of them have gone on to do great things. Billy Brannigan, for example, who plays Travis, he's you turn on like the ID channel and you will see him. He does all of those, like, Deadly Neighbors and all that stuff. Laurel Topol, who played Amy, who was phenomenal. She was in a Blumhouse movie. She's
Yeah.
on Hulu. Yeah, I mean, so they've gone on to do some great stuff. So I've lucked out to have to work that I've gotten to work with some wonderful people that really made my projects a lot better than they should have been.
See, I mean, I'm a person who I do like trash for
Mhm.
sure. I like some trash. But
But that's what I mean. That's what I grew up watching. The eight. I
yeah,
mean, those direct to video or the direct to the video 80 slashers, all those ridiculous ones. That's what I love. That's what I love.
but then you see something like, I when I watched Night Feeder,
Hmm.
that was one that I hadn't known much about it. Initially, I realized later, like, oh, that's Centra Wilson, and so that who she is in that movie and how young she is there is like places it in the 80s for sure. But like you could have told me, oh, this is a tribute to 80s SOV horror because it looks so slick. It
Yeah.
looks so good. And I feel like even in this genre and these subgenres, and I think Party Night's a good example of it. It could be at first glance for someone who doesn't look too much into it, be like, oh, it's a slasher teens. Okay, I get it. I've seen this, but it's not. It's so quality. Like you said, you have a great cast. The writing's great. You write and direct all your movies thus far,
Mm-hmm.
and you have these brilliant special effects on it. So there is this quality work coming from you and from other contemporaries. And so I've spoken recently to a few filmmakers. We're in a new golden age of indie horror, and I feel like Terrifier 2 might be an outlier in that it made millions, but it's still a good example and epitomizes how things are trending. Do you find that it's easier now to get these kind of movies done, or is it just that you have really devoted horror fans who became horror creators?
I think, gosh, that's a great question. I think it's both. Obviously, the age of social media has really, really allowed a lot of these indie filmmakers to get their films made, to get their films in front of an audience. I know for me, if it wasn't for social media, I would have never made a film, period. I guarantee it. Because with social media, you have the crowdfunding platforms that, again, early 90s, 80s, you did not have that. You had to find investors or you had to max out your credit cards to make a film. So crowdfunding also really has allowed me to make my films as well. So I think with the whole concept of crowdfunding and social media, where you have the opportunity to network with and meet a lot of different horror fans from not only just like your little city, but all across the world. I mean, I've made so many acquaintances and have networked with so many people that, so I would say, yes, it is easy to make these films in terms of getting the resources to do it. I'm not saying making a film is easy,
Right.
because if you want a film to look like there was some effort put into it, it's difficult. And I know there's a whole slew of indie filmmakers who are content with filming a feature film in 2 days in their backyard. The consequences, it looks like it was filmed in 2 days in their backyard. I mean, I want my films to at least look decent. I'm not saying they're the best by any means, but you can tell the indie filmmakers out there, and I'm not specifically talking about me, that take the time and take the effort and put them into these films. And those are the filmmakers that you see deservedly get supported. Because at the end of the day, yes, horror fans want more horror, but I do think they're privy enough to recognize someone that is a true fan of the genre and trying to respect the genre and giving them something that's, for me, like like I said, I love 80s. So my films, I hope that I'm giving other 80s horror slasher fans some nostalgia when they're watching my films.
Yeah. I feel like, you progressed from, and I think it's fair to say each movie progresses in little ways, incremental ways, or even maybe in your eyes, exponential ways, because you see, oh, I improved on what I learned by making it. Again, having watched them out of order, I loved them all.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mrs. Claus is the second one that comes out and is your sort of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt, and I know a lot of this from your great podcast, Dark Knight of the Podcast, but I mean, there's an homage there to Christmas slashers, Black Christmas specifically, And so you are still paying homage to 80s, 70s horror, but then Teacher Shortage feels way more personal.
Yeah, my favorite horror film of all time, and everyone, if you listen to the podcast, you know this. It is Black Christmas, the original Black Christmas. To me, it's a masterpiece. It's untouchable in the annals of horror. And so I always wanted to do a Christmas themed slasher film.
Yeah.
And so, like, for me, like, Mrs. Claus has elements of like Black Christmas, and then another really, really, really cheesy kind of underseen little early 80s gem called To All a Good Night. I feel like it's kind of a mesh up of those. It was fun to do. Again, a great cast, lots of creative kills and stuff that were fun to film. But Teacher Shortage, yeah, I will say I'd never had seen a film, and I've seen tons of horror films. I'd never seen a film where it was the teachers that were being targeted and killed off at a high school. And anytime you have a film with a high school, it's generally the students that are getting killed. There might be a teacher that gets killed here or there, thinking like cutting class or something, but they're not the focus. I've been in education for a long time now. And so the idea kind of was always in the back of my mind, like, oh my God, it'd be kind of cool to have a film where teachers are being killed off, because teachers, and so a lot of the dialogue in the film is stuff that I've heard or I've said, but like teachers are they can be some of the most, like, I don't know, entitled, annoying people that you encounter. So, but on the flip side of that, I wanted to do something that was fresh, and I wanted to do something that I thought made a little bit of a commentary, because I hadn't done that with Party Night or Mrs. Claus. Well, maybe Mrs. Claus with the concept of like fraternity, sorority, bullying, hazing, stuff like that, but something that was a little bit more sharp. And I think if you are a teacher or you are familiar with the state of education and you listen to the dialogue of Teacher Shortage, you definitely get that whoever wrote it has to have been in education,
Right.
because it is making a statement about a lot of things with the education system. And it has been really cool. Like, some of my teacher friends have watched it and they're like, oh my God, yeah, you absolutely like nailed the whole like department meeting scenes, everything. All of that dialogue in Teacher Shortage is stuff that I've actually heard throughout my teaching career.
Yeah. And just a great title and poster art too when it pops up on Tubi.
What, you know what? It's so funny, and I hate to say this because I'm still in education. I work for the Clark County School District, but it's kind of good. I hate to say this, but it's kind of good that there's a teacher shortage nationwide. Because there really is, because people are like Googling teacher shortage, and lo and behold, my film will pop up. So
how it has popped up, and this will be both relevant to a topic I wanted to ask about, and talking about the next movie and your efforts to launch that. First, before we talk about Hollow Lake, I was privy to a conversation, and you can speak as much to this or as little to this as you feel comfortable, but I am interested in the topic of how these movies are being distributed and kind of some of the benefits and challenges to that. One example I'll give you is, so the third Saturday from October, this guy manages to make 2 movies representing 2 different periods, releases 5 first, kind of, okay, and then part 1. My understanding was pretty much on the film circuit festivals, and then how I get to see him is the day that they pop up on the horror category in Tubi, and that's most likely where it'll get the most exposure. And I think you could submit movies directly to them, but I think there's a lot of distribution companies that work on the streaming channels that these. We don't have video stores anymore. We can't walk in and look at the great cover art. Where I see the great cover art is on Tubi.
Yeah.
And for me, it is primarily Tubi. Can you speak to how that all shakes out as far as free on Tubi versus paid on demand versus, anything that ends up on Hulu or Peacock or Max or what have you?
Yeah. You know, all three of my films have gotten distribution through distribution companies, which is great for me because I've not had to handle any of the trying to get the film on Tubi or trying to get it on Amazon Prime or trying to get it wherever. They've done that for me, and I got to say, you know, they've done a great job. Um, I'm not necessarily privy to like me doing it myself, like how I would go about getting it on Tubi. I know there's probably a way because I know a lot of indie filmmakers get their stuff on Tubi, but like I said, for me, I had a distributor and they handled all of that stuff. So I've been, I guess, lucky in that regard that I have had the distributor that's able to take care of that for me. I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm really not knowledgeable about how to. I have not self-distributed anything, so I don't know. Not that I would not do it in the future, but I haven't. I haven't, so I don't know.
Gotcha. Um, I I know that also. So that's more the back end or the later end. I guess we'll say. Let's talk about the front end as far as the fundraising, and this would be a good segue to talk about what you have planned for Hollow Lake. This episode, as people are seeing it or listening to it, is the first day of the fundraiser as well. So
Yeah, I have not made a film in 4 years. Have not done a crowdfunder in 5 years. So a lot has changed, but I'm hoping a lot stays the same as well. Because with crowdfunders, I think they're great for a filmmaker, obviously, to get the funds, but they're also a lot of work. And there's the problem I'm seeing now is that the genre or the market or whatever you want to say is oversaturated with these Indiegogo campaigns. You see them constantly. I'm constantly seeing them on my feed. I'm constantly seeing people, that I've never even talked to DM me about donating to their crowdfunder, all that stuff. So it kind of worries me on that regard because there are so many of them. And with that said, there's so many people that have gotten burned by them, meaning that people have pledged to certain films that A, never got made, or B, they never got their perks. And so that soured a lot of people. What I'm hoping with the Hollow Lake campaign is to keep it simple, in terms of the perks. Like I feel like I know kind of what fans want. They want the DVD, they want the Blu-ray. There may be a few that want, a producer credit to see their name, on IMDb and stuff like that. But I think keeping it simple is the route I'm going to go. It's the route I've done with all of my films. I try to get a little bit creative with like the Mrs. Claus campaign, or even like the teacher shortage. A couple of the actors offered like, a signed autograph or a free and nobody wants that. If they're and I'm not being mean, but if they're supporting a film, there's certain things they want. They want the film, right?
right.
So I'm going to keep it simple. Hopefully it works out for me. And then I just hope that, people that have seen my films know that there is a certain level of care to them, that they're not just thrown together, and that they get made. No, and I say that because there's a couple films that I pledged to a couple. I'm not saying names because some of them are pretty well-known people. That I pledged to around the same time, like Teacher Shortage was being filmed, and these films have never been made.
Right.
And I've never gotten anything. So people will know I get my films done and get the perks out. Yeah. So hopefully that'll be a good kind of motivation for people to support me. And in 5 years, I've met so many other new people as well. So hopefully that'll help. And hopefully it's exciting that I'm returning and making a film, because it's been 5 years. I don't know if you know, but like I made my 3 films like back to back.
Yes.
Like
yes.
3, right? Not back to back, but like 3 years. One came out a year later, we filmed the other one. A year later, we filmed the other one. So it's been kind of a break from the whole indie filmmaking scene, and a lot has changed. A lot has stayed the same. So yeah.
I've heard you say that it takes so much out of you, like that more than, even if it's fulfilling in the end, that it takes so much out of you, the whole process, that more than people can imagine who've never done it.
It's draining. When you're Yeah, when you're doing something like this, it consumes you. I mean, there's not a day that goes by that for the next probably year and a half that I won't be doing something related to Hollow Lake. Like just today, I was going through the script again and pulling out locations, pulling out, the character sides and stuff like that, and getting ready to hopefully cast some people in the film. But then the work is just constant, finding locations, doing all that stuff, and then post-production stuff. Whew. The funnest part is on set, but even that's a lot of work. But yeah.
Where do you plan to make it?
You know what? Not Vegas, because it doesn't have the right aesthetic that I'm going for. I mean, it's called Hollow Lake. It's Vegas. We don't have a lake here. Our lakes are all dried up. So not really, but the aesthetic that I have for the film is very Midwest. So I'm thinking possibly Ohio. I may be bringing Roger, my podcast co-host, on board for the project. He's pretty much going to be in the film. We've already discussed the casting and everything. So I wrote a role, and when I was writing this character, like I didn't do it purposely, but all I could think about when I was writing this character is this is Roger. This has to be Roger. And I know, so he obviously agreed to do it. So he was in teacher shortage as well.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to have him back. I have a few other like casting that's in the works that I don't really want to say yet, but casting is going to be challenging for this project. It really is.
My request, since Roger in his own film Meat is playing a character named Brodie, is I would like a part in Hollow Lake named Roger.
There you go. Well, there's a couple of I mean, the thing about Hollow Lake, I'm going back to my roots in terms of bare bones, working with the budget's going to be manageable because Hollow Lake has literally a tiny cast. There's 5 main characters in the film. There's secondary characters, but literally people that are on screen for like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Mainly one location. Think Party Night. That's what we did with Party Night. Party Night was small cast, contained location. It really allowed us to spend a lot of time on making things look right, whether it was the effects or whatnot. Hollow Lake is going back to that sort of bare bones concept in terms of production, because Mrs. Claus, while it took place in one location, had a fucking huge cast, and trying to get everybody or getting them in and flying and then teacher shortage had an even bigger cast with all these different locations. We had schools, we had bars, we had this, we had I was like, you know what? No. Hollow Lake, I can tell the story and keep it very contained. And I really like the fact that it's really 4 main characters, because you really get to know these characters in the film.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is something that sometimes lacks in a lot of slasher movies, is that you don't really get to know the characters. They just become fodder for the killer. And I'd like to think in Hollow Lake, you develop a fondness for the character, so then what ends up happening to them makes it all that more horrific. And if you one of my favorite films of the last 20 years, it's probably been longer now, that is Eden Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see Hollow Lake, Eden Lake. I like to make all these little homage connections between films that I really like. I love Eden Lake, and I love The Strangers. And I think that Hollow Lake is a really nice combination of those 2 films.
Nice. And I mean, we get to hear you dive into just like your philosophies and preferences on Dark Night of the Podcast. I'm really so grateful for that show and those conversations and hearing what is important to you. And one of the big things you've harped on is getting to know the characters, even the victims, and having a sense of who they are before they're dispatched.
Absolutely. And one thing that Hollow Lake that I was really like is I still at some point want to do Mrs. Claus 2. I think that's inevitable. The script has been done for a long time, and honestly, if I'm being 100% honest with you, of all the scripts I've written, it's probably my favorite, because it really, I think, is tells a continuation of the story that people that like the first one are gonna be like, yes, but it just amps everything up. It's like Scream 2 says, you gotta amp up everything for a sequel. But I wanted to jump on Hollow Lake, and I'll be quick, but I wanted to jump on Hollow Lake because it is going to be a gay themed film. It's gay men, a couple who go to a lake house for a weekend, kind of to get away from the hustle bustle of daily life. They invite another couple to come with them, but before that couple arrives, one of the characters, Baker, he's been pressuring his husband, their newlyweds, Max, to have a three-way because their sex life has kind of meh, as we all know, when you get in a relationship, that can happen. So he thinks it'll spice it up. Max has been very hesitant, but he finally agrees because they're away from their home. They can get on an app and not be recognized. They're out in the middle of nowhere. So they go through with it, and it ends up proving to be the most horrific choice they could have made. And it just leads to a brutal, bloody, definitely my, if I can film things the way they are written in the script, it is going to push boundaries in terms of death scenes and what we've seen. But I wanted to jump on it because gay themed horror has really taken off these last couple of years.
Yes.
And I promise, and Roger can attest to this because he got the script years ago. I wrote this script probably 2.5 years ago. So this was before anything else had come out. This was before many of the other gay themed films that come out. Hollow Lake has been done for that long. I've just been sitting on it. So I was like, you know what? I got to do this because otherwise people are going to tell me that I'm copying some of these other films. And I'm really not, because mine was done too, before, but also it's totally different. Like Roger's doing Meat, which is a very queer themed slasher. I've read the script for Meat. I've seen everything that he's, all of the clips and stuff. Great. It's fucking phenomenal. It's totally completely different than Hollow Lake.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people have to think. Just because you have gay characters doesn't mean it's the exact same. I love the guys, the monster makeup team who did Death Drop Gorgeous and Saint Drogo. Reading the description of Saint Drogo, you could be like, oh, well, Hollow Lake sounds exactly like. I've seen Saint Drogo. Phenomenal film. Those guys just set the bar way up here for indie filmmakers. But again, very tonally different than Hollow Lake.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that really true of any movie that decides not to center straight white cis men? You could, I'm sure, there's folks who are going to dismiss black horror movie. Oh, it's a trans horror movie. This is a gay horror movie. It's like every writer, director, even cast has their own special flavor to it, and each story has its own special oddity. Even something like, I'll just give you an example of I watched Natty Knox, and it had like, here's Daniel Harris, here's Robert Englund, here's the guy who directed Halloween 4, here's Bill Moseley. But I did not see what I expected. They kind of jammed a bunch of things in there. Like, to be honest, it's like a ghost movie. It's a haunted house movie. It's a revenge movie. Like, there's a lot going on, and it's up to you to, your mileage may vary on whether or not they pull it off. But it just made me realize a couple other films that I'll be reviewing soon. Like, everybody just has their own weird story to tell, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've always said, like, my films have just gotten progressively gayer as they've gone on, which, I'm a gay filmmaker. I'm a gay male filmmaker, so it only makes kind of sense. And you've heard me say this on the podcast too. Me and Roger have discussed it. I'm just baffled that there are so many gay horror fans and gay horror filmmakers, but there's really not a lot of gay horror films out there. There's not a lot of these indie filmmakers that are making LGBTQ themed films. And it's pretty sad because there's been like 3 of them in the last couple of years, and then we call that an explosion of gay cinema just because there has never been. So I feel like you got to take advantage of that. Party Night had no gay characters. Mrs. Claus had one, Tyler the podcaster. Teacher Shortage, gay. And now Hollow Lake, super gay, like really gay, like probably going to offend some people with some of the scenes. But that's what you got to do. You got to push boundaries, right?
Absolutely. It's excellent. Definitely looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else we should cover before we do the official goodbye of the podcast here?
No, guys, just one of my the thing that's been keeping my horror taste buds satiated these last couple of years is definitely the Dark Knight of the podcast. Me and Roger have a blast doing that. It's something I look forward to every week when we record, because it's just like I have an outlet to sit down and really dive deep into horror films with somebody else that I know is just as passionate about it as I am, because otherwise I don't have anybody. And I know, like, Roger, his partner doesn't like horror, so he never gets to like have the conversations. But it's really been a fun experience. If you haven't listened to an episode, check it out. We're on episode like 115, which is mind-boggling.
We'll on the links in the description of this have the Patreon, the link to the show, the link to the fundraiser, which is up and running as of this publication.
Yeah.
And Troy, thanks for joining me today on The Chamber.
No, thank you for having me. This was great. It's really the first conversation that I've gotten to really have about Hollow Lake. So awesome. I really appreciate you inviting me on.
Thank you.